Hello and welcome everyone to Raising Remarkable Teenagers. I am so excited today for this episode of Raising Remarkable Teenagers, guest and expert. And today we've got Dr. Tara Eden here. Beautiful face. I'm so happy to see you. Dr. Tara is going to introduce herself, but before Tara introduces herself, I want us to think about what our topic is today. And it's something we talk about a lot. It's about emotionally connecting with our teenagers, how we as parents can emotionally connect with our parents. It's a subject that we love to know more about. We love to hear. We love to get every strategy and snippet, everything, because we know from experience as parents and experts and all of us, we know that in teenage years, there is usually a sort of disconnect that happens. And we want to know how we can close that gap, how we can bridge that gap. And so every little snippet that we can get, we go for it. That's why we are coming for you, Dr. Tara. There you go. Come over. Let us know what you've got for us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here. Um, First of all, let me have a private practice located in North Carolina, and
Mm-hmm.
I've been in this business over 20 years, and I work with parents on all different issues, but one of the most common themes is how parents can connect with their kids, especially during this time of COVID, where everybody's lives are turned upside down.
Mm.
So, and teenagers, naturally they're in a stage of development where they're interested in connecting with their friends,
Yeah.
where they're learning to be more autonomous. They're sort of practicing some of the skills they need to have to become productive adults.
Mm-hmm.
But as parents, sometimes we end up interacting with our kids where it primarily can them. Did you get your homework done? Did you walk the dog?
Mm.
Did you do this chore? Or how's things go? Like we pepper them with questions,
Mm.
and they can end up feeling like we're just either lecturing them or probing them for information,
Mm.
and there's not as much time to just connect and be together and enjoy each other's company because we're all so busy, even during COVID when things have really slowed down.
Mm. Wow. Do you know when you said that, something came to my mind about we are more concerned about the doings than the being. It's not something I tend to use a lot, but when you said that, I just thought, we are asking them, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? So we turn them into a human doing instead of actually connecting at that being level. Oh my goodness, that's just something that was an aha moment for me.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, too, is when we get into that space where we're just asking questions or prompting them, we're also not really sharing parts of ourself with our
Hmm.
kids.
Hmm.
So we might get so focused on whether they've done their homework or finished a chore that we don't stop to share a thought we had about something or an emotion that would allow us to sort of connect and interact. And as your kids get older, you do have the opportunity to have a relationship that's sort of a give and take, where you can share something about yourself, like, oh, I had a really tough day at work. I had a really stressful client. And for
Hmm.
a minute there, I felt really discouraged. Or, oh, I'm frustrated that I didn't get good sleep last night. And you're not complaining. It's not about making your child your friend, your confidant, but
Hmm.
it's about kids recognizing like you're a person, they're a person, you have separate experiences, and you can share them with each other, which will help build a connection beyond doing.
Wow, wow, that is so profound. That is so profound. I had not thought about it like that. You know, I speak with parents a lot, and like I said to you when you started talking, something just came to my mind. Actually, what we are more concerned by the doing more than the being. And when you said about sharing ourselves, we make ourselves human by sharing. Yeah, you know, when you're sharing these experiences, and it's an opportunity for them to open up as well and share with us, isn't it? And are you
Hmm.
saying that's when connection happens?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of coaching and role modeling we can do with kids when we share something about ourselves versus telling them, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. Instead, we could say, oh, goodness, today I was really frustrated and I wanted to say something really grouchy to my coworker, but instead I remembered that I sort of had to stop and think. And so I went and got a drink, and then I came back and I told them how I felt about it, and we problem solved together. Versus telling your kid, when you get into a conflict with your peer, you should be doing this, this, and this, and having it look like a lecture.
All right. Say, so what you're saying is it's about instead of telling, we model it. We
We're
practice
modeling.
we practice it instead of telling.
Hmm. It's a
Wow.
discussion, and there's more opportunity for collaboration. So I have two teenagers at home,
Yes.
and in fact, my older daughter is my co-host on my podcast.
Oh, nice.
And so she gets to see a lot of the like the way that I think about things, the way I discuss things.
Mm,
And so I in the months that we've been doing it, I've had the opportunity to role model for her how you ask people questions, how
mm,
you follow up with conversation, how you say something that indicates that you're sympathetic or that there's a part of the conversation that's relatable. And
mm,
I realize not everybody has the opportunity to co-host a podcast with their kid,
mm.
but there's a lot of opportunity to have conversations with your kids where you take these small moments and you connect. And it might be talking about, the eyeshadow they wear or sharing your thoughts about a TV show they're watching. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be the most profound moment.
Mm.
And every time you interact with your kid doesn't need to be this big learning lesson.
Yeah.
But you're always in a position where you can teach them how to communicate, how to think rationally, how to problem solve, how to be emotionally responsive to someone else.
Mm.
But if you don't have that eye contact with your kid, the casual moments where you're just in the same room together, if you're not showing interest in their activities, even if it's something that's not really interesting to you as an adult,
Mm.
I'm not really interested in video games. But when my son excitedly tells me about how he participated in this tournament, and I'm able to ask him, like, well, what did you do when you were playing with that kid and he was getting so mad? And it's just casual. It's not blaming, it's not judging.
Mhm.
And he feels connected and nurtured by me.
Absolutely. Wow, that is interesting because the other day I was speaking to some parents and I said to them, I'm not a fan of TikTok at all. But my daughter, who's a teenager, she's TikTok day and night, right? Well,
Mhm.
I don't mean it literally, but she loves it so much. And she will bring me anything on TikTok. She'll do dances, and then sometimes she'll make me do dances with her. And what I have realized, those those are the moments. She doesn't do it all day. She will do the TikTok all day, but with me, she'll come to me maybe twice a day and do TikTok with her. But those few moments mean so much to her. She thinks I'm all that. because of TikTok. In
Mm-hmm.
my heart, that's not something I want to do. But like you said, because it's of interest to her, because it's something that she values, when I get engaged with it, when I get engaged with her, there's that connection that happens. But then, most parents don't think like that or are not interested. So how would you sort of encourage parents, for example, to get involved in some of their kids' activities, even though they have no interest? That means I'm asking you, how can you motivate parents of teenagers to get involved in activities that are absolutely no interest to us?
Well, I think it's important for parents to realize they don't need to do it for 2 hours a day.
Hmm.
5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Kids really get excited in just those few minutes. And like your daughter with TikTok, like she likes to show it to you, but she also really enjoys doing it by herself or doing it with her friends. She doesn't need you to do it all day.
That's right.
But a lot of times we're tempted when our child brings us something they're interested in, we can be judgmental. We can say, why are you wasting your time with this? Or I don't like their language. Or whatever it is, we'll immediately come out with something that's sort of critical.
Hmm.
And then that puts a barrier versus saying, show me what you're doing. And then, TikTok, I'm not a TikToker either, but there is definitely some stuff on there that's funny. And so for you to say, oh, this one is really funny, and then maybe they show you one and be like, oh, that one's not my style.
Yes.
But versus, why do you care about this? This disappoints me that you think that this is interesting.
Hmm.
And another thing that's really helpful for parents is to recognize like you have the ability to sort of influence what their social media stream looks like
Hmm.
when you say, oh, I really like this TikTok. She's so empowering for women. Look how confident she is. Or I love the message that this person is conveying about, bravery or
Hmm.
body acceptance. Or you might say, I think it's fine who you're looking at, but why don't we add in some TikTokers that maybe are more leaders or send positive messages, and you might have the opportunity to help curate their TikTok feed so they're not just inundating themselves with things that are maybe more superficial or focused on appearance or
Hmm.
focused on wealth. So there's some opportunity for you to gently and slowly, not in a judgmental way, have a positive influence on what's being presented to them,
Yes.
throughout their day. Um, and I think that parents, it's really important to recognize like we want kids to return this, right? When we say, "Oh, I want you to come, look at Christmas lights with the family," or "I want you to come into the store and help me pick out something for the house," like they're not really interested in that either.
Yes.
But we want them to learn that sometimes we have the spirit of sort of giving and being there for the family member. And we don't want to expect them, like, you need to be interested in what I'm doing. I want to go to the botanical gardens this Sunday, and
Yes.
I expect you to have a good attitude.
Yes.
And then they come and show us something they're interested in, and we're like, I don't have time, or that's silly. Like, we have to have it go both ways.
Wow. Do you know what? I think I think you're giving us such wise nuggets, because I had actually never thought of it as a reciprocating activity. When we ask them to accompany us for whatever, maybe go to a friend's house or family person, sometimes they have absolute no interest. But then when they ask us, and they come anyway, because they won't be
Because I
left.
have to.
Yeah, they have to, and they won't be left home alone, and they probably don't want to miss the perks that come with it, maybe going past some food place or something. But then when they ask us to come and see something they are squiggling or something they are watching, we rubbish it. So actually, that's not fair. I had never thought about it like that. It's actually not fair. And what we are teaching them in that case is that You follow me because I'm big and strong. I don't have to follow you. And unfortunately for teenagers, I feel they'll interpret this, my stuff doesn't matter. And unfortunately, they can even interpret that as I don't matter. And what happens?
Right. Or they just want to hide what they're doing, like keep it private because nobody wants to be enjoying something and then have somebody spoil it for them.
Absolutely.
So parents will say, oh, they just go to their room and they're on social media, or they won't even sit out in the family common area and do their thing. They close themselves off, and then they feel like they don't know what's going on with their teen, and they are at risk for having poor supervision at that point. I mean,
Absolutely.
you want to be able to walk by your kid as they're looking at their cell phone and peek over their shoulder and not have them feel immediately defensive. You want them to be like, oh, this is what I'm looking at. Isn't this neat? Versus them, stepping away because they feel like you're rejecting their interests, or like you said, themselves.
Absolutely. And the judgment, what I heard you say just a moment ago is looking for the good in, even though you don't fully approve of what they are watching or what they are listening to, but looking for something good in it, and then we can guide them, like what when you said about the TikTok. I mean, and we know this is what happens with social media. Whatever you watch, that's what the Google and TikTok and
Yep.
Facebook, that's what they feed more. So by appreciating the little that they're showing you, then you can guide them to to check on other, you can influence them to look at other videos, other write-ups, other pictures, which then, according to Google and the social media algorithm, they will start feeding that to them, and that way you have influenced them. This is amazing. This is so amazing. So what I would like to ask you, in terms of course, you've given us a couple of snippets about how we can emotionally disconnect with our young people, is by judging them, by not having time with them, or just rubbishing what they're doing instead of getting in there gently and then guiding them. So how would you, how can you say, how would you know, for example, if I've been a culprit or something like that, right? How can I restore that sort of relationship so that my young person is not struggling with this disconnection? Because when they are disconnected, they are emotionally struggling because they haven't got your support.
Right. Right. That's true. So if you've already had a circumstance where there's a barrier between you and your child and that's developed over time, it's really important to recognize it's not going to be solved overnight.
Mm.
And there might be times where you reach out and extend interest or your attention, and they kind of reject you for a little while because they're in the mindset that you might be dismissive or just focus on lecturing. So your parents are going to have to be persistent with taking these snippets of time, showing interest, having a gentle approach. But I also really encourage parents to kind of approach their kid. Like, I'll give an example. A lot of times we wait for our kids to come out of their room.
Mm.
Or we'll call up the stairs, hey, come down and have dinner, or come down and watch this movie. And they're like, no, thanks. And we're not going to force them or yell at them. So we kind of let them do their thing.
Yes.
But sometimes it can be helpful just to knock on their door and come in and say, oh, what do you think of this shirt I'm wearing? Or, hey, I was thinking about that photograph that's on your mirror. You have a more updated picture. Do you want me to print one out for you? Or just kind of a small like moment of giving. For me, I'll come in, our cat likes to lay on my daughter's bed, and I'll come in and just snuggle with the cat for a few minutes and just be there casually. I have a cheerful disposition. I'm willing to demonstrate humor, And I'm not there for any reason. I'm not there to give a direction. I might
Yeah.
only stay 5 minutes and then I leave and move on with my day. But it's me approaching my kid and having them see over repeated incidents that things are going to be okay. We're going to be relaxed. And I'm not just waiting for her to come to me because I think a lot of times we actually put the responsibility of connecting on our kids. And like we're the adults, we need to put ourselves out there, ri- risk being rejected, and
Yes.
still kind of come back in and be okay with it.
Absolutely. So obviously we need to be brave enough to feel that rejection, and it can happen. I mean, when you've given that example, I was cringing because I know the number of times I have knocked at daughter's door and she's like, "What?" And then I just say, "I just wanted to say good morning." And then I go in and I give her the kiss and she'll be like, "Oh, all that." But you can see she wants it, but she also doesn't want, she wants to feel the power. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
she will say, "What do you want?" You know? And sometimes I'll say to her, "Actually, I was just coming in to check for you to advise me on how I'm dressed." And you can see her get up. It's that giving her some sort of importance. Get
Hmm.
up. I am the advisor of my mom's, you know,
Yeah.
etiquette or
Well, and you care about her opinion. You
yeah,
care about her opinion.
absolutely.
And it's really tempting for parents when they go in their kid's room to start tidying up or to criticize, like, why are your papers so messy on your desk? How do you think you're going to get something done? Or they start, kids do, from my view, do not get 100% privacy. But at the same time, you can't always go into the room and start poking around their stuff. And so you got to demonstrate a non threatening, relaxed vibe when you go in there and your focus is just on spending time with your kid and notice what things they seem to feel good about.
Mhm.
If they don't want you picking up their makeup brushes or they don't want you getting physical with them and hugging them and kissing them and they want you just and you just like for me, I definitely stay back. I just sit on my daughter's bed, pet the cat, we talk about how cute he is, and whatever she's doing is acceptable. If she's working on some homework or brushing her hair or, it's, I'm not in there to criticize her choices.
Hmm. So it's about making yourself as less threatening and as less threatening, as more friendly, as I'm just here for just being here. And if you want me to go, I'm happy to go. Yeah. So I'm just thinking.
Yeah. And I think setting a goal of spending,
Go on.
what's your question?
No, no, no. Go on. Go on.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that having a goal of spending some time in there,
Mhm.
and it could just be 5 minutes, and letting them see repeated incidents of you being relaxed, and you being responsive to their cues.
Yeah.
And I think that if you can show humor, if your kid is a kid who appreciates humor, that's always a great, where you can be silly or you can show them something funny you saw on your phone and they can really connect over that and it can bring a lot of like lighthearted moments to the
Oh,
relationship.
nice. The question I want to ask, because I don't want us to miss this particularly, how would you know? I mean, of course, in teenage years, there's a lot happening in there's a lot of happening in their brain. There's a lot of happening with the hormones. There's loads of changes, and obviously, even emotionally, there's a lot of changes that happen. So how would you be able to differentiate between typical teenage emotional struggles and actually a sort of mental health, when we are veering, that point where you think this is not typical teenage behavior. And when is it time to say, I think we need help with this? Well, how would you explain to the parents that? Because that's a question that keeps coming up. Because they say to me that uh, my kid, this is happening. This kid sleeps 50 hours a day. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it's so when do you know this doesn't look right? This needs another person to look at. This needs more than me being friendly, more than me being there, more than me having that connection. How would you tell?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that if your child is experiencing a lot of irritability, they're very impatient, they are struggling to have consistent sleeping and eating habits, if they seem to feel really angry
Mm,
and for kind of no reason, or they just seem unhappy, or they're showing sadness, they're more tearful. One of the primary things I look for is if they're finding pleasurable activities less pleasurable.
yes,
So most of the time, kids might be super annoyed by boring activities, but they still really enjoy fun activities. But
yes,
if you're seeing that even the fun activities are hard for them to enjoy, that's probably a sign that feelings of sadness are taking over, or feelings of anxiety.
yes,
If kids are saying sort of statements about themselves that are sort of self-hating, like I'm a loser, or no one likes me, or I can't do anything right, or I shouldn't be here, or something like that, then that's a sign that, there could be symptoms of depression or significant anxiety.
mm,
Um, I think a lot of teenagers, it's really appropriate for them to gravitate to their friends. But if they have some healthy connections, they're really enjoying their friend time, they're attending school and it's going okay, they show interest in things like, maybe they're into music or art or sports or, something like that, then I think you're probably show that child has got some balance, and they're going to have their highs and lows like teenagers do,
yes,
but they're sort of erring more on the side of showing contentment with life.
yes,
But if you're just seeing that chronic state of being really grouchy, withdrawn, avoiding things, loss of pleasure, the disruption in their eating or sleeping, like those are things to be concerned about. And also, kids will sometimes say, something's wrong, or I wish I had somebody to talk to that
oh,
wasn't mom and dad. And if they say it, we need to be responsive, because there's definitely been times where parents, when I ask them, I'll say, oh, does your child, the parents will call me for counseling services.
mm,
And I'll say, oh, do you think your child is comfortable with this, is interested in this? And they'll say, well, they've mentioned a few times that they might like to talk to someone.
yeah,
And I think, oh, I wish, I want parents to be pretty responsive to that right away. If
yeah.
your child is asking for help in their way, we want to tune into that and get them those resources, because oftentimes they know that something doesn't feel right. Not always, but a lot of times they do.
So what I'm hearing you suggest is as soon as you pick up these vibes that something's not okay, do you then speak to the young person and suggest that someone else could help, or how do you do it? Because I know sometimes teenagers, they 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 almost feel offended when you do things for them. So do you start the discussion? Do you say, "Oh, I think this is going on and I'm concerned about you. Should we speak to someone?" And you mentioned that you wish you had someone else to speak to. Is it time for us to speak to someone? Is that kind of a conversation you would go, or do you just seek for help?
Well, sometimes parents will call around and see if they connect with somebody, because parents can have hesitations about who their kid might be working with, and I think that's fine.
Oh, yeah.
But also, sometimes it's helpful to mention it to kids.
Mhm.
They might initially reject it and be maybe even offended,
Mm.
but then a couple weeks later, you bring it up again, or you say, listen, it's really important that we address this. Like, this can't be your life that you feel so irritable all the time.
Yes.
And you start to really gently set an expectation that you expect them to be part of the solution,
Uh-huh.
that we're not just going to wait this out. But if you go in and you expect to mention it, have them immediately embrace it, and have an appointment 3 days later, that's probably not realistic, because we all benefit from having kind of a warning about something and thinking it over.
Yes.
But just so you know, there's been times where parents will reach out for help. They don't really want to use the word therapist or counselor because they think their kids are going to be offended, or they're worried they're going to assume that we're saying something's wrong with them. But there has been times where kids have said to me privately, like, you seem nice, but I think I need a counselor, because the parents didn't call me a counselor. And I'm like, oh, actually, I do that too. And they're like, oh, good. I didn't want to tell my parents because I didn't want to freak them out.
Oh.
So there's times when kids are actually kind of worried about what their parents' reaction is if
Mm.
they ask for help. Like, they're worried their parents are going to think they're suicidal,
Yes.
or think they're weird or crazy. But they can acknowledge that they would benefit from speaking to an adult that cares about them, but isn't, that direct adult in their life. So I think sometimes parents shouldn't make the assumption that their kid is going to immediately reject the idea.
Oh.
It's something that's talked about on TV shows. Celebrities mention therapists. Like, it is getting more
It is.
discussed in our society that therapy and counseling is a helpful tool. So
Yes.
sometimes when we hesitate to bring it up to our children, it's because of our bias,
Our own.
not necessarily because of them.
Oh, brilliant. So, but there is still a bit of a stigma uh,
Mm-hmm.
around surrounding that, and especially at that time, especially in teenage years, when they don't want to feel weird, they don't want to feel because of everything, and you and I know, because of how the brain's working, they know some of the feelings they have, they feel strange, and then they feel like they're the only one. And obviously, so how would you encourage parents to maybe talk about these feelings, these thoughts sometimes, and how the young people can get help? Because it is important, I think, sometimes to almost, like you said, normalize it in terms of
Yes.
and cut down that stigma. Because how would you encourage parents to do that?
Well, I think as early as possible for parents to speak positively about mental health care. If they've had a positive interaction with a mental health provider themselves, or they know of somebody at work. I mean, sometimes we can tell a story about someone else, not their private business. We're not going to say the neighbor down the street is seeing a therapist and tell your kid the neighbor's business. But you might say, oh, there's a lady at work who I think is a really, great person. And her daughter was, and you might share a couple symptoms. She noticed she wasn't really spending as much time with friends, or they weren't really feeling connected. And she was telling me about how her daughter worked with this counselor, and she really found it to be helpful. And you might just share that little anecdote.
Yeah.
You don't need to say, and I think you should too, but
Oh,
you just
no.
might mention it as part of your day that you're sharing. Or you comment on a TV show or something where you're like, oh, that counselor's like, really a good character, or whatever, just to kind of normalize it. And also, it's important for kids to recognize, like, some of these things, because it falls under the domain of, like, medical care, is a private. Like, if they see a counselor, that doesn't have to be something that they volunteer with their friends. They should feel no shame in it. But if it's something they feel like they want to keep private, and they might not even share it with a sibling, they might go to an appointment and their sibling doesn't need to know everything about them. And it might be up to them to experience it for themselves and decide what feels right to them.
Mm,
But I think it's also important for parents to send the message to their kids like, I'm noticing you're struggling and I'm here to support you.
mm,
And, they're not going to be in trouble if they're worried about going to a counselor, but we're not necessarily going to be a family who's struggling and we just do nothing about it. Like
that's
we need to get
right.
into problem solving mode. And sometimes kids will say, well, let me try this myself first. Like they'll say, I'll be better about my technology usage, or I'll work harder in school. And then you might say, all right, well, let's check in on this in a couple weeks. And if it's still something you're struggling with, then maybe we'll see what we can do to find somebody who can help with this. And
Mm,
then your child might say, yeah, okay. And then you can follow. And, it's okay for kids to feel apprehensive about it in the beginning.
mm,
I mean, there's a lot of kids who come in and they're pretty defensive. And then they get to know me. They see that I'm a nice person. I'm not interested in lecturing them or forcing them to tell me every feeling. And they relax and they enjoy the positive attention.
yes.
It's time set aside just for them. And they end up really enjoying it.
Wow. So what I would ask now is, I mean, with this, everything that's been happening, especially this pandemic and that, there's been a lot of a feeling of loss,
Mm-hmm.
especially one thing I know for sure is that our teenagers have been most affected. I mean, all of us have been affected, and but our teenagers. So how can parents help their kids adjust? How can we help them adjust? We ourselves are trying to adjust to it. So
Yeah.
how can we help?
Well, I have a couple suggestions. One of them is it's really important to walk the line between allowing your child to grieve, the parts of their life that feels different or feels unsatisfying, but it's also important that we don't let them ruminate. And so ruminating is when you think about it obsessively, you get into a place of feeling victimized, you focus on the negative over and over. Like we want kids to feel comfortable expressing, well, I'm so disappointed that my school's not doing graduation like they did last year.
Hmm,
Or it's really, frustrating that our baseball team isn't playing in the tournament or whatever it is, and
yes.
have them really be disappointed and express it and not sit there and dismiss them or say, well, at least you don't have COVID,
Hmm,
but also still have a sense of gratefulness for the things that are going okay, because there's still a lot of things that are going okay.
there is.
And so it's walking that line. Like it's okay to have kids kind of go up and down with it, because I think adults feel that way too, where
Yes.
some days we're like, oh, it's okay that the world is a little quieter and we're spending more time at home. Like I feel good about this. And then other days you're like, I just want to go out to dinner and to a movie, or
Hmm,
I just want to go to a bar with my friends, and those things might not be accessible right now. So recognizing there's going to be highs and lows. um I also think it's important for kids to keep not a really rigid routine, but at least not get their days and nights flipped. We're seeing a lot of teenagers who are staying up till 3 or 4 in the morning, and then they're sleeping till 3 in the afternoon. They get up, they're sluggish, their meal times not right. They're getting up at 3 and they want to have breakfast food, and then they're not eating dinner with the family. And then maybe mom and dad are going to bed at a decent hour because they're working. And then the child is up and they're alone and they're making questionable choices online. They feel disconnected and sad. So it's helpful to at least have them keep their days and nights appropriate
yes.
so that they can have more meaningful connections with the family
Hmm.
and their community.
So what I'm hearing you say, this is a conversation that parents and teenagers, especially teenagers, we need to constantly have these conversations, and also maybe explain why it's important for them to maintain that routine. You're not saying they be rigid, because
Yeah.
the kid will ask you, why do I have to go to bed at 9 o'clock? I haven't, I mean, there is some sort of flexibility, but overall, we need to have that routine so that they can maintain that sort of stability and connection. Because if they are awake all night and you are asleep, you can't be with them. And if they are
Mhm.
sleeping all day and you're awake at that time, you can't have those connections. And it's a good thing you said about being awake all night, because what we find is, unfortunately, and I'm going to say this, and I tell parents a lot, unfortunately, in those dark hours, that's when the pedophiles come out. and and either, no matter how protected your child you think your Wi-Fi is and everything, that's when some of the things that my daughter has said to me that have been sent to her on Messenger, I'm thinking, how can someone do that? But then they have the time when they do that because they know it's probably because no one is supervising the young person, and no one, and maybe the kid's going to be so shocked they won't tell anyone.
Well, and we're kind of in a more vulnerable state at night. I
Yes.
mean, most of us don't stay up in the middle of the night and feel super happy and content with the world. We're worrying about something, we're looking at something on the internet that makes us feel sad. We're more aware of the places in our life that we feel discontented.
Mm,
So there's times when kids are feeling that way, and there could be somebody who reaches out to them, or they can reach out to someone else. I mean, I think of all the Instagram posts of teenage girls, and they take a snapshot of tears running down their face, and like they're really emotive, and it's kind of not a good healthy way to communicate or get attention. It's not a positive way to get attention. And so there's more decision making in the middle of the night that's questionable.
yes.
And you're right, the parent's not in the next room about to call them to dinner. So it's just a more vulnerable time across the board.
Yes.
And I just think it's important for kids to live in a world with other people, and that is during the day. And that's when the TV that's appropriate for family is on.
Mm,
That's when conversation's going to occur. That's when meal times are. That's when chores are most likely to occur. And you want your kids to have balance. And it's okay if they're online and connecting with their friends or looking at something they're interested in, but they also need to be part of the household and have a sense of purpose in their day. And when you don't get up till 4 o'clock and then the house quiets down at 9:30, there's not much opportunity to feel like you have purpose.
absolutely. And it's in the day that they learn those skills, they learn those relational skills, they learn what real life is. Because when they go online, it's not, we don't even know whether the people they are looking at are real. There's so
Mhm.
much fakeness, as you and I know. There's so much fakeness. I talk to kids about this all the time. I show them how people go to great lengths to Photoshop, to, you know, the, and when they're looking online, if online is their only source of information, then they're living in a deceptive sort of world. And then when they actually come out into the world and face the world as it is, they can't cope because they never learned. Yes.
Absolutely. And they're more prone to get involved in a negative commentary, to be influenced by things like racism or conspiracy theories or anti-feminist, content and pornography and things like that, just because of the lack of supervision and the fact that they're in that emotionally vulnerable place. So we don't want to have our kids in that circumstance if we can be protective. And
Mm,
it doesn't mean your kid has to go to bed at 9 o'clock. It doesn't mean they need to get up at 7. But we want the majority of their day to be during the daytime hours when they have access to same age friends, their family members, and events going on in the community.
and even the healthy, that's how the body clock works. And
It is.
metabolically, that's what's healthy for the body and for the mind as well, right?
Well, you mentioned when we first got on our call today that it was 4 p.m. where you are and it's already getting dark. And I think, well, what if your child was waking up at 3 o'clock and they didn't even have a lot of exposure to daylight? You know, they couldn't go for a walk in the neighborhood with the dog, or, stores are closed. And I know a lot of times we're avoiding stores, but still, even to go on a trip and sit in the car while mom or dad goes in and grabs some groceries, like those opportunities,
I miss.
might not be there. So
Wow. I'm so delighted about all the strategies that you've given us. I am I can imagine. Did you see just how much I tend to talk a lot, but I was just listening. And obviously my listeners will notice this. They will notice, Angela, you were just listening. This was really, you've given us some really profound information there, some really beautiful strategies. Now, before we finish, I always ask the guests to leave our viewers, our listeners, with just three practical strategies or steps that parents can practice this week or today, just to enhance that connection with their teenagers, just to enhance that connection with their young people, because it's about practicing. And I always ask if we can have just three. I know you've given us a lot, but I want them to take at least three that they can practice this this week. So when they contact you, because I know I will send them to contact you, the next thing you're going to do is they will contact you. They can say to you, "Oh, this is what I did. This is what happened," or this, because it's feedback. We want to practice this. We don't want to be just hearers. We want to be
I know
doers, right? So
we can do a lot of talking about kids' development in a general sense, but it's also really important that we have takeaway practical suggestions for parents. I'm a big believer in that on my podcast. That's the goal of, we talk about a problem, we define it, we talk about the underlying reasons or risk factors, but then we talk about some takeaway points for parents to really feel like they have some actionable steps.
absolutely,
So if I had to have to say three things, probably the first thing I would say that parents can practice right away is using more emotionally expressive language with their kids. So identifying feelings as their kids are talking or as they're talking to their kids. So they might say things like, "Wow, that sounds really frustrating," or "Are you feeling discouraged?" Or I might say, "Oh, I feel excited," or "I feel like I'm dreading it." And they're using emotionally intelligent words versus just either talking about the content without emotional language, or they're using mad, sad, glad. And,
yeah,
it really doesn't go more in depth than that. So I think that parents can, in their conversation, really help kids learn to be more expressive by role modeling that emotional language. The second thing I would suggest is that parents make sure that they have regular and consistent eye contact with their kids. It's always so tempting to have one or both people like looking at their phone or watching the TV, or they're cooking dinner and their back is to their child, or they're driving in the car and their eyes are on the road. And it doesn't need to be, some creepy staring at each other, but just having that face to face, that eye contact and that connection. I'm finding that we're really having less and less opportunity to do that. And so I think that would be my second tip. And then my third tip would probably be using language with your child that's sort of we're a team, we problem solve together, we collaborate, and that doesn't take away the parent's authority to make final decisions. It's really important that adults make adult decisions
Yes.
and kids be given some control over kid decisions. But I think that having parents convey to their child, like, I'm here to support you. Let's talk about this together. I'm interested in hearing what you think. I think if kids get into the mindset that their parents are good listeners and are going to take into account their opinion, and there's times I'll say to my kids, this is going to be an adult decision because it's important that I take the leadership on this.
Definitely.
And there's other times where I'm able to hear information from them that I might, if had I not stopped and listened, I might not have had a really helpful perspective from them. So those are my 3 tips for today.
Wow, this are beautiful steps, guys. You had that. The first thing is use emotive language. Use that emotive language. Find out how they are feeling. And then the next thing is, which one was it? Oh yeah, use eye contact. Be present for your young person. Don't be lost when you're speaking to them. You're on the phone or on the computer or you're watching something and you're just saying, yeah, yeah, contact. Give them that eye contact. And then the third one is, I heard you say, it's like collaborative language. Well, let's do this together. What do we think? What can we do to improve this? Negotiate with the young person. Of course, as Dr. Tara said, there is sometimes we have to make that adult decision, but let's not miss those opportunities where we could have picked something from the young person, which is what creates that connection. So I am so excited, and what I would like you to do is tell us where we can find you, because we want to find you for more.
Well, a really helpful way to get information from me and about the work I do is to go to my website, which is www.drtaraegan.com. And from there, you'd be able to access the books that I've written, my podcast, learn more about my coaching services. It also is a link back to my therapy page. I'm in the process of creating some really helpful e-courses and webinars. And then also every Monday, I offer a free parenting webinar. And it's at noon Eastern Standard Time, so New York City time here. But every week we talk about a different topic. And so this week we talked about, ways to have the holidays be more connected with your family. We've talked about, what to do with kids who are feeling left out or signs of anxiety in your teenagers, things like that. And if you can't attend live, then if you register for the parenting webinar, you can get the replay sent email to you, and then you can watch it at your convenience. So there's a lot of resources that I like to offer on a regular basis for parents without there being a cost to it. And with the podcast, it's important to note that not only do I offer, my expertise, but I also do a lot of interviewing of experts around the country. So I'll talk to professionals who can speak about porn addiction or how to support parents who are going through divorce or separation. We've talked to occupational therapists when discussing sensory issues in kids, behavioral issues, depression. So that is a really great resource to not only get information from me, but from other professionals. And that podcast is called One Day You'll Thank Me. You can find it on any podcasting platform, and new episodes come out every Wednesday.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put that link with Dr. Tara's information here, just down this link. And what I would encourage you, just don't listen to this alone. Get your friends on. Forward this to your, share it. As you know, we always share this information because when you gain, I gain, and we all gain, and our young people will gain out of all this compounding gaining from all of us. And that's why we've got some amazing, that's why I bring you some amazing expertise from expert like Dr. Tara today, it's because I know we can't do this by ourselves. We've got to, it truly does take a village to raise young people. And since we don't live in villages anymore, that's why I bring you a neighbor like Dr. Tara, someone else, and it's from this that we grasp all this information, these strategies, these snippets, these steps, and then we can just grow in ourselves. And in growing, we are able to support our young people as they navigate these high waters, because they truly can be challenging, and we want to be armed and have the capacity ourselves to be able to support them. So I am so grateful, Dr. Tara, for today, and we hope to see you sometime soon, because I don't think we've got everything from you. I think you've got loads to give, and we should.
Well, I'm happy to come back anytime, and I really appreciate your audience listening today.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Tara, and all of you viewers and our listeners, and from all of us here at Raising Remarkable Teenagers. We wish you a great day. And remember to use those snippets that you got today to go out and help you raise highly effective teenagers. And as we always say, we're here, all of us here to support you to raise remarkable teenagers. Bye bye now. Bye.
Bye.